Denise and Patrick hit $2.4 million on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Patrick printed the spreadsheet. Denise stuck it to the refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a lobster. Both 52 years old, and the tab at the bottom said $96,000 a year. Forever 26 years of maxing the 401k and driving a Camry with 190,000 miles on it, and they had made it. And then, 3 weeks after Patrick turned in his badge, a health insurance quote showed up in the mail for $2,100 a month. Here's the part that broke them. If they had less money, that quote would have been close to zero. That is not a loophole. That is the rule. There is a specific band of wealth that is big enough to disqualify you from every kind of help and small enough that one bad decade ends you. And if you are anywhere on the road toward it, you are walking in without a map. My name is Nick, and I have spent an unreasonable share of my adult life reading retirement research nobody asked me to read. If you have ever looked at a number in a spreadsheet and thought that should be enough, hit subscribe, because today we are going to find out exactly where your number breaks. Let me be crystal clear about something first, because I do not want this misread. $2.4 million is a lot of money. It is not almost enough. It is not a consolation prize. According to the Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances, the top 10% of American households starts right around $1.94 million in net worth. If you are in your late 40s or early 50s, $2 million puts you roughly in the top 10% of your own age group. Meanwhile, the median American household net worth is about $192,000. Not the average. The average is over $1 million, because a few thousand billionaires hang off the end of that number like a kid hanging off a bathroom scale. The median, the middle, 192,000. So if you are watching this from somewhere well short of 2 million, do not click away, because here is the thing that makes this video about you. Every trap I am about to walk you through is triggered by your income, not your net worth. Not one of them checks your balance. They check what you report in a given year, which means they are waiting for you at 600,000, at 900,000, at whatever number you are working toward. The people with 2.4 million just get there first and set off the tripwires so the rest of us can see where they are. And there is one number sitting in Denise and Patrick's file that decides whether that 2.4 million lasts 45 years or 19. It is not the 2.4 million. Remember that it exists, because almost nobody mentions it. And it is the only number in this entire video you actually control. Let's start with the rule you have definitely heard and probably never checked. The 4% rule comes from a paper published in 1994 by a planner named William Bengen. He ran every 30-year retirement window in the historical data and asked the question you are asking right now: what is the largest amount you could pull in year one, adjust for inflation after that, and still not run out? About 4%. The Trinity study confirmed it 4 years later. And that is where it entered the culture, got printed on 1 million blog posts, and quietly stopped being questioned. Notice the part that never makes it onto the blog posts: 30 years. That number was built for somebody retiring at 65 and planning to be gone by 95. If that is you, you are fine, and you can stop worrying about this part. Patrick is 52. If he lives to 97, which is not remotely exotic anymore, his retirement runs 45 years. It is half again as long as the study that produced his withdrawal rate. And when researchers stretch the horizon, your safe number falls. Michael Kitz's ran it. Going from a 30-year retirement to a 45-year retirement drops the sustainable rate from about 4.1% to roughly 3.5%. Morningstar's most recent guidance put the safe starting rate at 3.9%, and that is still for 30 years. So run it on yourself. $3 million at 4% is $120,000 a year. That same $3 million at 3.5% is $105,000. $15,000 a year gone every year for the rest of your life. You did not spend it. You did not lose it in a crash. It was never there. It evaporated because of an assumption buried in a research paper from 1994 that politely expected you to be dead by now. For Denise and Patrick, the same haircut takes 96,000 down to 84. Now, you are a reasonable person, so you have already solved this in your head. Fine, Nick, take 3.5 instead of 4. Done. Next problem. That works beautifully if the market delivers returns in a tidy, evenly spaced line. It does not. It delivers them in clumps, and the order of the clumps matters more than the size of them. Say you retired in 1966 with a perfectly normal, balanced portfolio. Over the next 30 years, you earn a compound return of roughly 9.5% a year. That is a fantastic return. You nearly run out of money anyway, your good years showed up last. Your first 15 years after inflation were essentially flat while prices climbed about 6% annually. So every withdrawal in that stretch meant selling shares at depressed prices to buy groceries. Those shares do not come back. They are not there in 1982 when the market finally rips because you liquidated them in 1974 to pay a heating bill. Your portfolio recovered on paper. You did not. That is sequence of returns risk, and it is the most underrated force in retirement math. Same average return, same starting balance, different order, completely different life, which brings up the uncomfortable part about right now. The Shiller-Cape ratio, which measures stock prices against a decade of smoothed earnings, has been sitting around 41. The long-run median is roughly 17. The only time it has ever been meaningfully higher was the peak of the dot-com bubble in 1999. I am not predicting a crash, and neither is that indicator. High valuations have a terrible record of predicting crashes. What they predict reasonably well is weak real returns over the following decade. And a weak decade is precisely the decade that decides everything for you if you just stopped working. Because if your first 10 years are the flat ones, you do not get to go back to your old job at your old salary. That door does not slam, it closes very quietly over about 4 years, and nobody sends you a notice. Denise and Patrick have a friend named Sonia. 49, 3.1 million, retired a year ahead of them, and there is one thing Sonia did at 46 that Denise and Patrick can no longer do at 52, no matter how much money they have. Hold on to that because it costs them more than the market ever will. First, though, the thing almost nobody retiring early has actually priced. Medicare starts at 65. Denise and Patrick are 52. That is 13 years of buying your own health insurance on the open market with no employer and no group plan behind you. And in 2026, the rules for that market changed in a way that landed almost entirely on people in exactly this position. The enhanced premium tax credits that had been in place since 2021 expired at the end of 2025. Congress did not extend them. The old subsidy cliff came back. Here is why a cliff is so much worse than a tax bracket. A bracket is a toll booth. It takes a bigger slice of your next dollar and waves you through. A cliff is a trapdoor. It takes everything at once the moment you cross a line, and it does not care that you are $1 in. Above 400% of the federal poverty level, your premium subsidy does not shrink. It goes to zero. The Kaiser Family Foundation ran this on a 60-year-old. At $62,000 of income, that person pays about $515 a month for a benchmark plan, because a subsidy absorbs the rest. At $64,000 of income, same person, same plan, same body, they pay about $1,244 a month, $2,000 of extra income, roughly $8,750 of extra cost. For a couple, the line sits somewhere around $84,600. And that is the number in Denise's kitchen, because her spreadsheet said 96. They were $11,000 over a cliff they had never heard of on the first day of their retirement. So let's actually walk your money down the stairs the way nobody does before they quit. Start with the $84,000 the Horizon math allows. Subtract $25,000 for a health plan you no longer get a subsidy on, and you are at 59. Subtract property tax and homeowner's insurance on a house you already paid off, call it $11,000, and you are at 48. Subtract a federal tax bill, and you land at roughly $42,000 of actual spendable money. $42,000 from $2.4 million. Let me say that again because it does not sound real the first time. $2.4 million in the market produces about $42,000 you can actually hand to a cashier. That is the take home of a household earning around $55,000 a year, except you spent 26 years and every raise you ever got to arrive here. And here is what an $11,000 cliff actually feels like once you are living on it. Because this is the part the spreadsheets cannot show you. It feels like turning down a consulting job in October because the money would push you over the line. It feels like running a tax calculation before you sell a single share of anything. It feels like your spouse asking whether you can help your daughter with a security deposit and you saying yes, and then quietly rerunning the whole year. It feels like being 58 years old with $2.4 million and structuring your entire life around not earning too much. You did not save for 26 years to spend your 50s performing poverty on paper, but that is the machine you walked into, and it is worth saying plainly whose fault that is. It is not yours. You did not overspend. You did not buy a boat. You saved more than roughly 90% of this country and then met a set of rules that were written for somebody else entirely. Nobody wrote that subsidy thinking about a 52-year-old who stopped working. It was written for workers, and you stopped being one. By the way, before we get into the tax side of this, I put together a school community where I break down this kind of math without a pitch waiting at the end. Link is below if you want it. Back to it. Because that health cliff is not standing alone, it is standing in a room with two others, and they are all wired to the same switch. Early retirement is supposed to be your golden window for tax planning. Your earned income drops to nothing, so you move money from a traditional retirement account into a Roth, pay tax at a low rate now, and defuse the bomb waiting at 73, when required minimum distributions start dragging money out whether you want it or not. That strategy is real and powerful. There is also a 0% long-term capital gains bracket, running up to about $98,900 of taxable income for a married couple. Realizing gains at 0% is close to a free lunch, and the tax code serves roughly one free lunch per decade, so you take it. Here is the problem. Every dollar you convert to a Roth counts as income. Every dollar of gain you realize counts as income. And your health subsidy is measured on income. So look at the box you are standing in. Convert to a Roth and defuse the future bomb, and you blow past the health cliff. Harvest gains at 0%, and you blow past the health cliff. Keep your income low, protect the subsidy, do nothing for 13 years, and you hand a much larger balance to your 73-year-old self, who now has forced withdrawals and a bigger tax bill and no choices left. And there is a Medicare surcharge waiting at 65 that prices off your income from 2 years earlier, so the conversion you do at 63 sets your premium at 65. It is financial twister where every math square is on fire. And that number I told you to remember, here it is not your net worth. It is your modified adjusted gross income, the income you choose to show on paper each year. That one figure sets your health premium, your Medicare premium 2 years later, your capital gains rate, and your tax bracket. It is the only major variable in your retirement the market cannot touch and you can. Nobody puts that on a refrigerator. Everybody puts the $2.4 million on the refrigerator. Now I want to be honest with you, because it would be easy to keep stacking bad news until you close the app feeling worse than when you opened it. There is a strong counter-argument here, and it deserves a fair hearing. Sonia is fine. Not because she found more money. Because her plan bends. Sonia does not withdraw a fixed number. She uses guardrails, which you can steal directly. When your portfolio falls past a certain point, you skip that year's inflation raise and trim a little, and when it runs hot, you take more. Morningstar found that flexible approaches like this can push the sustainable starting rate meaningfully above the rigid baseline, in some cases well over 5%. Same portfolio, different rules. And the fixed withdrawal assumption is pessimistic for another reason. David Blanchett's research on what retirees actually spend found the retirement spending smile. Real spending tends to decline through most of retirement, around 1% a year early and faster later, then ticks up at the end for healthcare. You travel at 60. You do not travel like that at 82. Then there is the finding that reframes this entire genre of video. The Employee Benefit Research Institute studied what retirees actually do with their money, and people who retired with $500,000 or more spent only about 12% of their assets across their first 20 years. Roughly a third of them died richer than the day they quit. Your risk is probably not the one you think it is. Read that again. The most common outcome in American retirement is not running out. It is dying with nearly all of it. You spend 40 years building a fortress and then starve to death inside it because you are too scared to open the pantry. And the retirees who spent the most were not the richest ones. They were the ones with guaranteed income covering their basics. You do not need more money to feel safe. You need a floor. So no, $2.4 million is not doomed. What is doomed is a rigid plan. If you withdraw a fixed inflation adjusted number no matter what happens across a 45-year retirement starting at today's valuations. With a subsidy cliff sitting in the middle of it, that plan has a real and measurable failure rate. Change one word in that sentence, the word fixed, and most of the risk walks quietly out of the room. Which brings us back to Sonia and the thing she did at 46. She bought a long-term care policy. That is it. That is the whole trick. She bought it at 46 because at 46 it was cheap, and Denise and Patrick cannot buy that same policy at 52 for anything close to what she paid. If you are watching this in your 40s, that is the cheapest thing on this entire list and the only one that gets more expensive every year you think about it. Here is why that matters more than it sounds. Fidelity's estimate says a 65-year-old couple needs about $345,000 for healthcare and retirement, and that number gets quoted constantly. The footnote almost never does, and the footnote is doing an enormous amount of work. That figure assumes Medicare, so it excludes every year before 65, and it excludes long-term care entirely. It is a hurricane estimate that does not include wind. Meanwhile, federal research finds roughly 70% of people who reach 65 develop a serious need for long-term care, and a private nursing home room runs about $127,000 a year. Medicare does not cover it. So the number you were handed to plan around leaves out your most likely large expense, and every year you are actually worried about. There are two more line items you will not find in your plan. About half of American parents with adult kids send them money regularly, averaging around $1,400 a month. You did not budget for that. Nobody budgets for that. It just shows up in your checking account and stays there. And your Social Security benefit gets calculated on your highest 35 years of earnings, which means retiring at 52 stuffs zeroes into your average for the exact years you were supposed to be at peak salary. Your benefit shrinks well beyond the standard early claiming reduction, and nothing on your statement warns you that is happening. On top of which, the trustees project the retirement trust fund depletes around 2033, after which incoming taxes cover about 77% of scheduled benefits absent action from Congress. So the plan is retire at 52, live to 94, absorb a nursing home, subsidize a 26-year-old, and collect 77% of a benefit you were promised. No pressure. None of this is an accident, and none of it is a conspiracy. It is what happens when rules written for one kind of life get applied to yours. The 4% rule was published for a 30-year retirement, then quietly stretched over your 45-year one. Your health subsidy was built as a cliff, and cliffs do not care about your circumstances. Your Medicare surcharge is a cliff. The net investment income tax threshold has not been adjusted for inflation since 2013, which means it quietly catches more households every year, and one of those years is going to be yours, and nobody will have voted on it. You did not design any of that, you just have to walk through it. And the trap in the title is not that $2 to $3 million is too little money. The trap is that it is the exact amount where you are wealthy enough to be invisible to the safety net and not quite wealthy enough to stop caring about it. Above 5 million, the cliffs stop mattering because you can absorb them. Below 1 million, the subsidies mostly catch you. In between, every decision is a trade-off and nobody hands you the map. Denise and Patrick are okay now, and I want to tell you exactly what changed, because it was not the balance. They picked a number, $78,000. That is the income they decided to live at, on purpose, chosen to sit under the cliff with room to spare, and everything else got built around it. Patrick does about 15 hours a week of consulting, mostly because he was bored. And that 15 hours does more work for them than another $400,000 in the account would have. The spreadsheet is still on the refrigerator, the lobster magnet is still holding it up, the number on it is just smaller now, and it is the first honest one they have had. Quick reminder that I am not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. Run your own numbers, and if the stakes look anything like this, run them with somebody who does this professionally. And if you want to go deeper, our school community link is still below. So here's the question worth carrying out of this video. It is not how much do I need. That one has been asked to death, and it produces a number that goes on a refrigerator and stops being useful the day you actually stop working. The better question is this: at what income am I going to choose to live, and what does that one number cost me? Because the number you saved is a headline. The number you show on paper every year is the one that quietly writes the rest of your life.